Hello everybody and welcome back to Study with Julia. Today I'll be discussing some of the worst books I read in 2024. And worst books I'm classifying by books that I rated 2 stars or less, because actually there weren't many 1-star reads, but in my eyes 2 stars is still pretty bad. I guess 1 star is like a did not finish or like close. And then 2 stars is like I finished it, but like I had to force myself to read it pretty much. So without further ado, I guess let's just hop in and see what the worst books of 2024 were for me. Okay, so the first book was a pretty interesting March read. And this is one of the 2-star books, not 1-star book. And that is Bloodstream by Emily Carter. I got this because I quite like romances. I think they can be cute. And obviously I'm a big F1 fan, so I thought, let's get a motorsport romance. I'm just not a massive fan of the whole enemies to lovers trope. Maybe it's on me. Did I know that that's what it was going to be? I don't think so. But also I feel like the writing was... I wasn't a massive fan of the writing as well. I feel like the trope itself was forced. I feel like this is one of those book talk books where they're writing for the trope rather than for the plot, for the actual story. I don't know, it just felt a bit cringe. And also I feel like it was a bit... The beginning part, the enemies part, was very slow. And then the swap seemed so sudden to me that the story itself I just didn't click with the story, I think. I didn't like the character of Julian. The Faith, I guess she was kind of cool, you know. Quite liked her. Apart from, you know, there's always situations where I'm not going to like a character. But I think overall, it's just a bit corny. And I'm not into corny books. So... Not my type of book overall. Book number 2, another March read, and this I think is the only 1-star book. Secret by Rhonda Byrne. I read the Polish version, but I don't think language matters, does it? See, when I read this I didn't read it twice. When I read this, I thought maybe it's just because I don't believe some of the things that happen here. You know, I think it's not good to look at certain aspects in this book as a cure-all. I think it doesn't take into humanity, and like, things can go wrong in life just because they go wrong, and that's not because you're not believing things properly. It's not because you're not manifesting properly. I think this hasn't been described fully. So I thought maybe it was that. But later on in the year I read, it's called Expand the Power of Your Subconscious Mind by Murphy and Jensen, just reading off my book, and why I think it was a much more holistic approach. But this, yeah, it was pretty much a DNF. I literally just skim read the book because 2024 was the year of no DNFs, I was hoping. And I just think it's so important to like look into things from a more holistic approach. So I think some of the claims were just a bit too out there. I think it's just really important to take into account all of a person's, social, mental, physical well-being. But according to this book, you could solve every single problem with the power of your mind, is what I got. And I understand that maybe I wasn't reading it properly. There's a high chance of that because the writing itself didn't really jump out at me. And that's not because I don't like non-fiction, but I think this theme at this time in my life didn't interest me. While when I was reading Expand the Power of Your Subconscious Mind, I just enjoyed it more. So I guess to me, both of those topics were similar, but the other book just was so much better, and this just bored me. I don't have this physical book on me, but The Virgin Suicides by Jeffrey Eugenides. The characters just annoyed me. I see the appeal. but I feel like, to me, it fits in with a very specific genre of books, such as like We Were Liars and obviously The Virgin Suicides, maybe even The Guest by Emma Cline. To me, it's like that area of like life almost doesn't feel real in those books. That element of like, you can tell that it's from a psychologically disturbed perspective. And what I know, it's important to read books like that. In fact, it's so good to challenge your creativity, to be able to kind of step into the shoes of that person. But I think I find it very tricky to follow along when books are written like that. And it just annoys me from the point of view, like, you know, when you're watching a show and you're like, you know that someone's doing the wrong thing, but they do it anyway. There were several moments of that. Then also, I like reading books to make myself feel better. So books about suicide aren't for that. I guess it was a 2-star rather than 1-star, because I think it's still, I liked the fact that it did kind of challenge me as a reader from that psychological perspective, trying to get to put myself in the shoes of all these various characters. But yeah, this was a pretty poor April read from 2024. But I feel, see, the reason I'm commenting on when I read these books is because I am a firm believer that some books just hit so much harder in various seasons. You've got summer reads, winter reads, autumn and spring. Like, I think if you read a book in the right time, it just feels better. So that's why I'm commenting on that in this video. Because maybe if I read it in winter when it was just like a bit more glum, it would fit the mood more. But because I read it springtime, I didn't want to read it. But then again, it was based, from what I remember, in more of a summery time. So maybe it could be a summer read, just not a spring read. It didn't hit. Next book is another book that I don't have on me right now. So this was a summer read, because I read it in August, or at least I finished it in August, but I'm pretty sure it doesn't really matter. It was a summer read. And this is Exercised, Why Something We Never Evolved to Do is Healthy and Rewarding, by Daniel E. Lieberman, I want to say. This was 2 stars. I think I have a very specific taste when it comes to non-fiction books. In fact, there aren't many non-fiction books that I am a fan of. I think the best non-fiction author is, I forgot his name right now. I'll put it on the screen right now, but the guy who wrote about the disappearing spoon. Because I still like the storytelling aspect. I think you can merge the two. Because if you're talking about facts where they, in a way, they line up to a story, there's a chronology to that. But for this, I feel like it was just kind of, you know, facts written down. Which is good, you know, if you're doing research, if you're doing things like that. Maybe that was the purpose of this book. But for me, just kind of reading it for fun, to get more information, it wasn't. But I get that it might have been more specified towards people like sports scientists, nutritionists, bodybuilders, you know, people in the scientific research of exercise. But then again, there were some really interesting facts. Like, every time I read it, whether it was 10 pages, 1 page, 50 pages, no matter how much I read, after every single time I'd go down and I'd tell my mum a fun fact, or tell my sister a fun fact, because it was very factually packed. But yeah, I take this one, you know, that's on me, because non-fiction books have to be a very specific type of non-fiction books for me to like them. They've almost got to be fiction non-fiction books with some type of story behind them, or some chronology, you know? So this could be a good book. It's not for me. This is an October read, The Guest by Emma Cline. So I think it's similar to what I said about The Virgin Suicides. Like, it's so, like, you can tell that the perspective of the protagonist is a bit disturbed mentally, which made it harder for me to follow along, because I was, you know, reading and just in my brain going like, you really shouldn't be doing this, there's other ways. to solve problems. But obviously the beauty of it is, you know, I'm being exposed to new perspectives, and in a way I love that. And once more, I think this was heavily impacted by the time I read it, because it was set, you know, in the summer, beaches, things like that. I think this would be an amazing beach read, but because I read it in October, you know, maybe I'm a hater. Maybe this is jealousy seeping out because I wanted it to be summer. I would not, whoa. I wouldn't put that past me, Loki. I don't know, I just think I was expecting more as well. I guess it ends on a bit of a cliffhanger. Well, it, maybe not a cliffhanger per se, but it's a bit unclear, the ending. But it's not in the way that I like. I like when it's unclear because it leaves you wanting more. But for me personally, this book just left me a bit confused. And it was a 2-star book because of that. Penultimate book, once more, not one that I have, because in fact I listened to this as an audiobook. Small Act of Kindness by Caroline Day. Another 2 stars. This was a November read. Listen. And that's why I think it's important to note that it was an audiobook, because I feel like I don't get the same sense of accomplishment after finishing a book, but also I don't get to feel as much into the characters when I'm listening to an audiobook, because they have their voices, you know, they have their emotions, and it's just like watching a show. But when I'm reading a book, I like the fact that I get to kind of have that creativity, you know. I decide in my brain how each character sounds, what mood they're in at the moment, how they speak say a certain line or something. So I think that with the audiobook it was less stimulating. And also I think that the 3 perspectives that the story is told from were useful, but I feel like it jumped around either too much or too little. I couldn't strike that balance. You know, I feel like sometimes just a couple of things happen for one person, you're on to the next, you know, you only get a snippet of their perspective. And then at other times, you get almost too much information where it gets a bit boring, and only then do you get on to the next person. So I think this was like an 11-hour audiobook, something like that. But once more, I think if I read this, then it would have been a better read. That's why I think it's important to note that there's so many factors that affect this. So I'm not saying that any of these books are bad. I'm just saying that at the time, it just wasn't what I was looking for. Or the methods, you know, in this case, the method that I consumed the content wasn't kind of the best method for me at the time. However, I would still urge you to read this book if you are so inclined to. Seeing all these 3 very different people become such close friends and kind of help themselves in that friendship because of they're surrounded with, they're very different, and you can see kind of the pros that something like that has on a person. And final read was a December read, another 2 stars, and trigger warning, because it was Fire and Fury Inside the Trump White House. I read it in Polish. My thing is, I may have been biased because I don't like the man, but I just wanted, I guess, more information, knowing that he was coming into power, seeing what it was like in the last, in his last, what they called, term, I guess, as president. You know, it showed the truth. It was a very information-heavy book, and the fact that I still don't really understand all these political words made it a trickier read for me. But I think it's good to know. It's good to be in the know about, you know, seeing what he is as a person, seeing perhaps what might happen in these upcoming 4 years, because the last time he was in power, I guess, I don't remember, that was 2016. I was 9. I can't remember. So I guess this was just to keep me informed. I don't really know what to say about this book, because low-key it was just, I read it in Polish, as I said, and maybe that's why I don't know the political words of that. I don't educate myself in Polish politics. I don't want this video down political, so I think that's all I'll say for this book. Okay guys, thank you so much for watching this video. Please remember to like, comment if you've read any of these books, if you agree, if you disagree. Let's have a conversation down below. I look forward to reading your comments. And if you could subscribe, I'd be very grateful. But also, I'm on mocks right now. If you want to see what my morning routine looks like during my exams, you can click on that video there. And that will tell you everything you need to know. But I'll see you guys very soon. Bye bye.